Hi, everyone. So this is my Sleep and Dreams outreach project, and there will be two main parts to this. The first part is just covering like the general fundamentals of sleep science, and then in the last part, as time permits, I'll try to spend some time going in depth on sleep apnea, which is one of many sleep disorders. So we'll start off with sleep cycles. So there's two main kinds of sleep that you can have, which is REM and non-REM sleep. REM stands for rapid eye movement. And then within non-REM sleep, there's three subcategories, which are N1, N2, and N3, where larger numbers correspond to deeper sleep. So N3 is the most restorative, N1 is the lightest sleep. And essentially, the way sleep cycles work is like every 90 minutes or so while you're sleeping, you'll cycle through some or all of these stages. So starting with the lowest and then moving up to the highest. So next we'll cover a sleep rhythm. So essentially just like what biological processes happen that make us want to sleep. And there's two main biological processes that accomplish this. The first is homeostatic sleep drive. It's also known as sleep pressure. The way it works is that there's a chemical in your body called adenosine. And essentially, whenever you're awake, that chemical slowly builds up in your body. And the more of it you have, typically, the more you want to sleep. So when you're awake, the chemical builds up. When you sleep, you have less of the chemical, so you want to sleep less. So that's the homeostatic sleep drive. The one other reason we want to sleep is circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is essentially an internalized body clock. So your body has an internal sense of when it should sleep and when it should be awake. And the way your body learns this clock is through exposure to light. So if it's consistently exposed to light during certain times of the day, then it'll learn to associate that time of day with wakefulness and being awake. And if it's exposed to darkness in particular kinds of days, it'll learn to associate that with wanting to sleep. So next we'll cover the class catchphrase, which is drowsiness is red alert. And so I think the basic idea behind this is when you're drowsy, like when you're sleep deprived, you might be a danger to yourself. So if you're in a motor vehicle, if you're operating heavy machinery, it's very possible that drowsiness could end up being fatal. Essentially, drowsiness and sleep deprivation can end up manifesting very similar symptoms to alcohol consumption, where you might have poor reaction times, inability to plan, stuff like that. So that's why drowsiness is red alert. Next, we'll cover sleep debt, which is essentially the underlying cause of drowsiness. So I guess at one level, drowsiness is red alert means you might be in short-term danger, and maybe you shouldn't drive a car. But it also signals that there's some longer-term issue you need to deal with, and typically that issue is sleep debt. A sleep debt is pretty much what you would expect. It's getting less sleep than your body needs. The way you can calculate it is you can determine how much sleep you need on a given night. Say it's 8 hours, and then you subtract that number by the amount of sleep you actually get, which could be 6 hours, 7 hours. We'll say 7 hours, and that number is your sleep debt. So if you need 8 hours and get 7, you have 1 hour of sleep debt. Essentially, the issue is that this debt can kind of pile on. So if you consistently get 1 hour fewer of sleep than you need, your sleep debt will not just stay at 1 hour. It'll go from 1 hour to 2 hours to 3 hours. It'll build up over time, and it'll manifest itself as drowsiness, as well as many other symptoms. So the real red alert is dealing with your sleep debt. So now we'll go into some factors that influence sleep quality. I think in the interest of time, I'll try to go through these relatively quickly. But broadly, things that can stop you from getting enough sleep or getting high quality sleep can be mental health issues. I think the most common one is stress. So if you're stressed, you're typically less tired, you're less able to fall asleep immediately. It's also possible you might get up in the night, so that obviously influences your sleep. Some other fairly straightforward ones, light exposure, which I think I covered a little bit earlier. It'll throw off your circadian rhythm. Caffeine. So caffeine actually blocks adenosine. And as I mentioned, adenosine is related to your homeostatic sleep drive. So if it messes with that, it'll stop you from getting sleepy. And then the last one is sleep disorders. So I think that the first three I mentioned are fairly standard behavioral things, or things a lot of people do. But it's also possible you might have some kind of underlying sleep disorder. I'll go into some detail on those later in the presentation. So now we'll cover some common misconceptions surrounding sleep. The first one is that you can catch up on sleep during the weekends. And the reason this is false, or it is partially true, in that if you're sleeping like 3 hours per day on the weekdays, it's better to sleep more on the weekends than to sleep less on the weekends. Like it's better to sleep 12 hours to at least catch up on some than to still get 3 hours that night. But the basic idea here is that like rather than getting a very small amount of sleep most nights and then occasionally trying to catch up, you're better off just maintaining a consistent sleep schedule. The reason for this is that if you usually sleep very little and then sleep for a lot, your circadian rhythm doesn't really match up with that. So you'll be sleeping when your circadian rhythm tells you it's daytime, and as a result, your sleep quality will suffer. The next myth is that alcohol helps you sleep. There's an element of truth to this in that it will help you fall asleep faster. But similar to the first myth, consuming alcohol will end up hurting your sleep quality. I mean, it's much harder to get into a deep sleep if you're under the influence. So even if you fall asleep faster, you will typically sleep worse. The last myth is that if you can't sleep, you should stay in bed and try harder to sleep. This is sort of counterproductive because trying to sleep is kind of the opposite of sleep. You're like putting in effort when you should be resting. So it really does not work. The best thing to do is to get out of bed and do something quiet and relaxing, such as reading a book or going for a nighttime walk, and then wait until you're sleepy, at which point like you have the drive to sleep and you'll be able to sleep. Now we'll go into some common sleep disorders. So the first one is narcolepsy, which is a sleep disorder. The two symptoms are intense daytime drowsiness, so just feeling tired constantly throughout the day, and then like suddenly falling asleep in unexpected situations. So it could be like while you're in class, it could be while you're in the car, but just kind of like uncontrollable sleep attacks that the patient is not able to control. The next one is insomnia, which is fairly straightforward. It's just the like inability to sleep. There can be multiple forms of it, which could be finding it hard to fall asleep, or finding it hard to stay asleep, or getting up too early. The last one is sleep apnea, which is a sleep disorder where the patient like struggles to breathe during sleep. There's two types of sleep apnea, so there's two different like possible causes. One is obstructive sleep apnea, where like your airway is somehow blocked, such that you can't breathe while you're sleeping. The second one is central sleep apnea. Here the airway is not blocked, but your brain is failing to like send the necessary muscular signaling to breathe while you sleep. So some common symptoms of sleep apnea are snoring very loudly. That's the most like telltale sign of sleep apnea. And then other symptoms are similar to symptoms you would experience from sleep debt. Since essentially if you have sleep apnea, then you probably have lots of built up sleep debt. Since if you're unable to breathe while you sleep, you constantly wake up so that you can breathe. And if you're constantly waking up throughout the night, your sleep quality will suffer. So next, we'll go into some risk factors. In the interest of time, I'll try to get through these relatively quickly. The most common one is obesity. This is for obstructive sleep apnea in particular. But typically, if you have excessive fat, especially in like the neck area, that can obstruct the airways and prevent you from breathing at night. Some other ones that also block the airways in some way are smoking, which I think leads to like inflammation in the airways, and alcohol, which I think relaxes muscles in the throat, such that it can block the airways. So some other factors are age. So if you're older, you're more likely to have sleep apnea. If you, it's somewhat genetic. So if you have like family members with sleep apnea, you're more likely to have sleep apnea. And then gender. If you're male, I guess just based on like male anatomy, you're more likely to have sleep apnea. Now we'll go into some potential treatment options for sleep apnea. The first line treatment for sleep apnea is CPAP machines, which you can see in the top right corner. It's essentially it's like a Bane mask. You put it on. It's connected to a machine that like sends in a continuous airstream into your nose, such that a particular like air pressure is maintained, such that your airways stay open during sleep. That's the most common treatment. It definitely works. But there are some alternative treatments. One is oral appliances, which you can see in the bottom right, and one of our guest speakers covered in some detail. Another option is surgery, where you can like remove tissue to open up the airways. And then besides these like medical options, you can also make lifestyle changes. So for instance, if obesity is a cause of sleep apnea, you can lose weight. Similarly, if alcohol or smoking has something to do with it, you can stop doing those. So lifestyle changes can be done in addition to medical treatment or instead of. So that's my entire presentation. Thanks so much for listening, and feel free to let me know if you have any questions.